So this month, as I said, we are partnering with First Hawaiian Center, and we're lucky to have both Halona and Neil here to give some opening remarks. So I will hand the virtual mic over to Halona Norton Westbrook, who is the director of the Honolulu Museum of Art, to give a few opening remarks before we begin.
Thanks so much, Jetty, and thank you everybody for being here with us this evening. I have to say that listening to artists talk about their work is literally my favorite thing, and so I'm very excited, and I know that you all are too, to have that opportunity tonight. We're just incredibly honored to be working with these two artists, and can't wait to hear all about their process and their practice. So I just wanted to welcome you all, welcome these artists that we're so fortunate to have in our midst, and to be able to present their work. The partnership with First Hawaiian Bank is one that we're really proud of, and we're really grateful that we can work with them to further the work in the community and to bring art into the life of everyone who lives and works here. It's really important that art become part of the fabric of our community and woven into everything that we do. And we're just so delighted to be able to have this opportunity this evening and in this ongoing partnership to really work to promote the work of regional and local artists. It's something that's, I know, very close to my heart, close to the museum's heart, and is very important to First Hawaiian as well. So it's wonderful that we have that partnership. I also wanted to just mention that the museum is open, and we have a new initiative recently, Pauhana Friday evenings, that's free to local residents, and we hope that everybody comes along and enjoys that. We've really gone above and beyond to make sure that the experience is safe, and I know that we're all getting tired of living in the COVID reality where we're always on Zoom, but you know, as you feel comfortable venturing out, we would love to welcome you there. And the First Hawaiian Bank, as you know, those galleries are wonderfully airy and open, and I definitely encourage everyone to go check out the work in person as well. You know, to me, I've just been reflecting recently, and Thanksgiving's coming up, you know, so feeling extra thankful for the incredible importance of art in our lives, you know, and I think that we've all been experiencing this incredibly difficult year where art is more valuable than ever before as a means to kind of uplift us, to ground us, and to help us think about the future and imagine a brighter future. I truly believe that artists are the smartest people in our society, so it's important that we celebrate them and uplift them. And just wanted to extend my gratitude for all of you and for First Hawaiian Bank and for the artists themselves. So with that, I'll just welcome everyone and pass the mic along, the virtual mic along.
Thank you so much, Halona. Next, I would like to welcome Neil Char, who is the Executive Vice President of the First Hawaiian Bank Commercial Banking Group, and he is here to also give his greetings. So thank you so much, Neil.
Thank you, Jetty. And by the way, hey, Halona, great article in the midweek that we saw a few weeks ago. Just want to say on behalf of First Hawaiian, aloha, welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. For over 20 years, First Hawaiian Bank has partnered with the Honolulu Museum of Art, showcasing artists of Hawaii. And for me, I've been working with Allison Wong for over 10 years on all of these shows since I joined private banking. And my friend and colleague, Steve Brock, who's on the call, he recently took over private banking. So you may see him doing this at the next event. Steve, can you just wave so everyone can see who you are? Thanks, Steve. So since opening back in 1996, First Hawaiian Center has had a dedicated space in our main branch, and it's been solely for showcasing local artists and to make viewing art accessible to everyone. Our gallery is open during bank business hours to everyone, whether you bank with First Hawaiian or not. This terrible pandemic has made it very challenging for us to enjoy art safely, which has really led to this virtual event tonight. So you can view the current exhibit and meet the artists in a fun and safe way. I love art, just like all of you. Art has a way of bringing people together. It fuels conversation and allows for a diversity of opinion, which makes us stronger as a community. We want to thank Halona and the Honolulu Museum of Art for putting together tonight's program featuring Tom Walker and Jonathan Swans. I had a sneak peek earlier today, and I think you're going to love their work. Please enjoy tonight's presentation, and we hope to see you in real person at the next event. Mahalo. Aloha.
Thank you so much, Neil. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Catherine Love. She's the Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art at the Honolulu Museum of Art. And she will be discussing the works of Tom Walker and Jonathan Swans, whose artwork is currently up at the First Hawaiian Center. Just a quick reminder again, those questions and comments can go into the chat. We are encouraging that. We will have the specific Q&A portion at the end of each presentation. So I will hand it off to Catherine, and please enjoy.
Thank you everyone for joining us this evening for a virtual walkthrough with two of the artists who are currently showing at First Hawaiian Center, Tom Walker and Jonathan Swans. The current round of exhibitions opened last week and features as well a group show of drawings of 12 Oahu-based artists. So if you are able to see the exhibition in person, that show is up on the second floor in our long hall gallery, and it features pieces in a range of drawing media, offering a lot of unique visions of downtown Honolulu. I'd like to start by introducing Tom Walker. Just a quick intro before he speaks about his own work. He grew up in England and Germany. As a high school senior, he moved to Alaska and received his BFA from the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. In 2012, he moved to Honolulu to attend the University of Hawaii at Manoa and received his MFA. He currently teaches at Leeward Community College, and he will be exhibiting sculptural work as well next month at Shangri-La. So that'll be exciting. Additionally, be sure that you take a few moments to watch Tom's video that he produced for HOMA's Museum from Home, which is available on our website, where he talks about the challenges of moving his studio during this time of COVID-19. Tom's works combine traditional painting techniques with digital technologies and are incredibly detailed, elegant compositions which reference nature, science, and mathematics. And they're filled with overlapping shapes that appear as crystalline structures floating in an ambiguous space and speak to the complexity of the universe. His crisp, clean painting style reflects back on the hard edge abstraction and op art of the 1960s and 70s, but with a contemporary and digitally enhanced sensibility. So now I would love to turn it over to Tom to talk about his work.
All right, hi everyone. First, a big thank you to Catherine and everyone at First Hawaiian for giving me this opportunity to show my work during this pandemic. And you know, you would think as an educator, I would be used to the format of these online meetings, but I honestly have to set it so I can see everybody at the same time. So I feel like I'm speaking to a group and not just my computer. So yeah, it still hasn't quite sunk in that this is how our meetings are being held now. But anyways, thank you for all tuning in. And yeah, please do, if you have the opportunity to check out the show in person. These images here are, you know, they do represent the work, but I think seeing the work in person is clearly the way that we would all prefer to see the work. So to give you an idea of the backstory here is that my approach to art making and just my life in general has always been really without moderation. I tend to always be in these worlds of chaos and order, right? I mean, when things are going the way that I want them to be going, then I'm in the world of chaos, or I'm sorry, I'm in the world of order. And then when things are going not the way I want them to be, things are in disorder. So trying to look at the narratives that these stories come out of, I started looking at some of the oldest stories I could find that deal with this dichotomy of chaos and order. I mean, you see this in multiple cultures, right? The Taoists have their yin and the yang, and you know, we have these elements of opposition, chaos and order, that we all understand, right? Everybody seems to kind of be with these two modes of being at the same time. So I looked at, going back to the ancient Sumerian story, the Enuma Elish. It's one of the oldest stories that we know of that describes this this chaos and order dichotomy and how it leads to the creation of human beings. And so the works kind of start in this chronological order. The first painting of the series is called Tiamat, and I'll point it out when we get to it, but Tiamat was the Sumerian goddess of chaos, and it's represented by seawater and the unknown, and it's always this first principle deity. There was chaos in the world, and then order comes out of chaos. So the first two pieces of the show are Tiamat and Abzu. And again, Tiamat representing chaos and Abzu representing order. And both of the works kind of take on that aesthetic, right? The Tiamat piece is a chaotic piece that in the process of working on it is also very chaotic. There's a lot of randomness and chance elements that I allow for the work to happen. And then the Abzu piece is basically the manifestation of order. You'll see in the work, there's a lot of these repetitive elements that represent both chaos and order. So in Abzu, it's the all black painting that's all stripes. There's no organic shapes, there's no curves, there's no background. It's meant to be this visual aesthetic of order incarnate, right? And then you have Tiamat, which is chaos incarnate. And then of these two pieces in the Sumerian story, Tiamat and Abzu have offspring, which are Lahamu and Lamu, which each iteration of the offspring, I combine more and more elements from the chaos and the orderly aesthetic that I'm pulling from. And in this case, the stripe manifestation is meant to be that representation of order, and chaos are the backgrounds and the crystalline forms. And in some shapes they're more structured, and others they're randomized. And as another way to kind of pull this all together, these ideas of chaos and order are metaphysical concepts that we understand, but we don't have direct access to them. So my traditional painting techniques combine with, I use a lot of software in my work. So I'll use Photoshop, and I actually specifically use a program called Stella 4D, which allows me to create four-dimensional shapes, and I can put in variables. So going back, this is the Abzu piece. This is the complete visual representation of order. So I use Stella 4D to create four-dimensional shapes, and it's by pulling these four-dimensional shapes as representations of the metaphysical, that's my way of tying in these metaphysical narratives as well. So this fourth dimension is an aspect that we can't know, we can't touch, we can't see, right? It's not a tangible element that we can experience, much like these creation stories, right? The idea of Tiamat is this chaos deity. It's a metaphysical concept, and this mathematical world is one that exists, but it's also something that I ask my students a lot. Is mathematics something that we invented or something that we discovered, right? And if you think about that question for a moment, I mean, I have some students that say, oh, well, we invented it. And then, if you think a little bit more about it, it's like, well, no, we didn't really invent mathematics. I mean, we seem to have discovered it. It lies in this world that's outside of what we experience in a physical way. So the metaphysical and the chaos order dichotomy is meant to be one and the same, right? The representation of the fourth dimension is my way of accessing this metaphysical realm of chaos and order. So the blue piece that you see right here, that's Tiamat. That's the first in the series. So you can see the chaotic randomness of Tiamat versus Abzu, and then in each subsequent piece, there are elements that are drawn from both. So you get some more order in others, more chaos in others, and each iteration gets more. I don't want to say more complex, but well, no, I will say more complex. I'll say this: that the last painting in the series, which is Utuku, which is the word for the demons that are made that the gods create. It's interesting because that was one of the first I knew how labor and time intensive it was going to be, but I always envisioned it as the last painting in the series, but I had to start it first because of the time that I knew it would take to do it. And this was a strange, I've never done a show that in this format, as I'm sure this is probably new for you all seeing shows in this format too. But it was a difficult show because I had to, I had my studio and then COVID hit, and then I had to move my studio home, and then I had to move it back into the studio. So it was really challenging to work on these. Once I get one of these pieces set up and I'm using drafting equipment and tape, and it's not something that I can easily just transport to and from my home and studio. So yeah, it was a strange way to make a body of work, but like I said, I mean, each piece in the series kind of built off the ones before, and then there's a final large piece in the series which is called Andurra, which is meant to be this metaphysical space where Tiamat and Abzu and Lamu and Lahamu and Ki and Anu, all of these various Sumerian gods, all live in this world called Andurra, and there was this final piece that was meant to kind of represent this ultimate manifestation of the metaphysical fourth dimension that I've linked to chaos and order. So I guess that's kind of the quick elevator speech about the work. I would be happy to open up to questions if there's anything in particular, or
before we go to more questions, could you talk a bit about how
Sure.
you integrate the digital technology of Photoshop and Stella 4D, and how you use that sort of as a
Sure.
sketchbook for your
Sure. I think I must be one of the most unpainterly painters out there, I think, because I don't necessarily work in a traditional way of maybe starting from a hand-drawn sketch, or some artists may just start on a raw piece of canvas without having a clear idea. But what I do is I work within Photoshop as a sketchbook, and I'll build compositions, and it'll start out rough. Like I'll start with just generating just paths and shapes to start until I get somewhat of a formal composition that I'm working with. And then once I get it to that level, I'll go into Stella 4D and I'll start exploring the various four-dimensional shapes. If we were on Zoom, I could do a screen share with you and show you Stella 4D, but essentially it can build these really, you can set in a number of vertices and how many points that you want, how many planes you want to be working with, and I can modify and I can tweak that shape and that form. I can extrude, I can extend, and then I'll take that image back into Photoshop, and then there it becomes kind of this play where I can very quickly make edits to color, scale, composition. I can move things around, and that's essentially my sketchbook, right? I mean, the benefit is that if there's a change that I want to make, I can see it instantaneously. I can select an area, I can select a stripe, I can change the entire color harmony with the click of a button. So it's been really invaluable to have the digital technologies there. And then once I get what I think is going to be the piece, then I take that piece and I start to transfer it to the analog substrate, the wood. And then while I'm doing that, oftentimes things will change at the same time. So if I'm painting on the large scale painting, if I want to make a change, it's very easy for me to look at the digital version of it. And then sometimes the painting will actually affect the digital version, right? So sometimes the painting comes out to be something that's actually quite different than the digital version, but they always start with digital platforms first. And then in a way, it's like I kind of create the piece. I create the piece digitally, and then the execution of the piece is just the labor. Sometimes I finish the piece digitally and I'm like, well, I'm kind of done with this now, but then I always have to create the piece. So that's the last piece in the series there. And the bird is this, representation of the natural world that comes out of these chaos and order dichotomies. But yeah, like I said, the way of I've just kind of always worked digitally. I've never really kept a sketchbook. To me, it's so much more. I need that immediate change, that immediate visual alteration that I do. I need to see what that looks like in real time, and then execute it. And then this is the last piece in the series of the Andura, the world in which they live. I think somebody's asking a question, but I can't hear. Oh.
I have a question that came into me via chat.
Sure.
And I believe, I'm not sure if Jetty will explain, but I believe that maybe the best way to pose questions is through chat.
Okay.
You can direct your chat to either Jetty or to myself. But this question came in. So how much time does it take you to plan and complete one of your works?
That depends. Are we talking like during COVID or non-COVID times? Generally, I like to work on one piece from start to finish until it's done. I really don't like working on more than one piece at a time. So if I'm working on just one piece and I, from start to finish, and I build these on wood and I frame them out, and so all of that I include in it, because for me, a large part of the craft of building the frame and building the surface and sanding it and getting it just right, because I use tape, and the tape has to be, the surface has to be essentially as smooth as glass for the tape to do what I need it to do. So all of that building time is actually, a large part of it is getting the surface prepped the right way. But I would say, one of these pieces I could do in a month, in that time frame of start to finish. But with the way COVID was happening, I kind of had to work on multiples at the same time, which I really, some artists, that's the only way they'll work. But for me, when I work on more than one piece at a time, I get confused as to what aesthetic I was pursuing, and it's very difficult. Even though the works are largely formally very similar, there's a lot of hard edge abstraction, a lot of vertical lines. It's hard for me to jump from one to the next. So at one point during this series, I think I had like 4 going at, that was the most I had going at the same time. So it's hard to say how long those 4 took me, but to do one, I would say safely is about a month of work.
Another question came in. So when you say execute it, how do you exactly create the work? What type of paint do you use? And I believe sometimes you use a little bit of collage. Could you talk a little bit about the medium?
Sure. I mean, the primary way that I do it is I'll just draw. I'll do just kind of a one-to-one look. I'll draw from the screen that I have onto the piece. Other times I wouldn't call it cheating, but other times I've actually just projected onto it and mapped out the larger compositional structures. And that is just all with graphite and yardsticks and tape and rulers. So it's very much like like an architect would take a small scale study to a larger scale blueprint. I mean, the digital copy kind of works as the blueprint. But I use all acrylic paint. I don't really think I could do this with oils, with the drying time that oil takes. So I need these layers to dry very fast. I mean, all of the opaque layers that I build up, I mean, sometimes I'm painting and I'll actually have a blow dryer like with me to paint a layer and then just hit it with the blow dryer so it dries. And that's about 5 or 6 layers depending on what color I'm using. And then, I experimented about halfway into this process. I started thinking, is there a way that I could just use paper? I mean, because I'd never used collage elements in these pieces before. So I got my hands on some origami paper because it was super thin, and I was thinking, okay, well, maybe I can try my hand at, putting paper in. And I did it for a couple of these pieces. Actually, the piece that you see right here is a good combination of both, of manually applied tape and acrylic paint combined with watercolor or the origami paper. But honestly, I found the paper to be, I mean, it sounds like it would have sped things up. I mean, and it did in theory, but it didn't quite, I actually found that I was faster and more fluid with paint than I was with cut paper. Because with cut paper, I had a hard time controlling the actual shape of the pieces. Whereas with tape, I mean, I could pre-plan, I could design it out. Whereas with paper, like if I was connecting two shapes, with tape, I can outline the shape I want. But then with paper, you know, you kind of have to guess like how that piece is going to fit in there. So then I abandoned that. There was only 2 pieces that had some cut paper in there, but it was an experiment that I thought was worthwhile to try, but ultimately the paint is still the superior way to go about making these.
Another question, do you look to other artists, historic or living, who explored the 4th dimension or the metaphysical? Or is your work more inspired by this ancient legend and your own computer explorations?
Gosh, that is a great question. You know, this might sound counterintuitive as a visual artist, but I try to, I mean, I have the great artists that I like, you know, throughout my years that I just grew up just loving, and then the artists that inspired me in grad school. But as far as other artists that are exploring this exact theme, I would say that I haven't really tried to investigate too much. Whenever I get locked into a concept or a body of work, I don't know if this is a fault or a virtue, but sometimes when I get locked into something that I know I want to do, I almost try to avoid looking at similarly themed works as a way to, I mean, this sounds like, as a way to try to maintain, not authenticity, but I don't want to be influenced to the point where I find myself investigating other things that were not necessarily my own to start with. But at the core of it, though, I've always had that digital relationship, though. Like even when I was making work as an undergrad in Alaska, I was still I was using Photoshop and Illustrator to create pieces and then move them into the traditional medium. So that's been consistent. But I tend to, you know, every body of work kind of focuses on you know, I mean, I try to pull from the experiences that I'm going through, and this COVID thing was an interesting one because I think it was universally shared by all of us. I mean, I think we all understand the dichotomy of chaos and order, right? I mean, we were thrown into some real chaos when all of this happened. And my way of working in particular, this hard-edged geometric style of working, I would say that's the consistent thing in my work, is that me working in this way is it's a way for me to maintain control of my life. I mean, there's so many things that I feel are outside of my control. So when I'm working like this in the studio, it's my way of kind of taking back that control element, because everything is pre-planned, laid out, designed, and ordered. So it's also the process that's appealing, is this hard, tight, geometric, linear way of working.
Thank you. Are there any other questions anybody would like to pose through the chat box?
Susan, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, I'm still a bit confused about the process. When do you put paintbrush to this, or is it a digital paint? And if it's digital paint, how do you mix your colors?
It's not digital. These are all analog acrylic paint, medium, gloss medium, matte medium. So when I have the piece designed in the digital format, or at least designed for the most part, I mean, oftentimes there's many compositional questions that I still don't know. But once I have what I think is going to be the piece, then I start drafting with pencil and rulers and compasses and protractors. I start designing the geometric composition on the panel of wood. And at that point, then I start, after I've designed it and laid out the large compositional areas, then I'll start masking and taping things off. And the color mixing thing is a good question, because it's very hard to replicate the digital colors that I see on a laptop screen, because that's light, but then I'm working with pigment. But luckily, I mean, I've been, as a painter, I do my best to approximate what I think is going to be the color. But then that's often where the kind of the chaotic randomness will come in, because sometimes I goof and I mix the color incorrectly, but then it works sometimes it works. And I'm like, oh, okay. And that's one of those changes. And then that's what I mean is, if I get a color wrong and I put that in, then I can go to the digital image and it's much easier to find the digital color from the analog, right? If I have acrylic paint up and it's the wrong paint, I can then make the change in the digital image to then see, oh, okay, now what might my color harmony be if I messed up that color, but if I still want to salvage it. So there is this back and forth that happens with the digital image, like quite a bit. And I wish, like, you know, to me, like I said, you know, once all of the creative aesthetic choices come in the creating of the digital image. And then, yeah, like I said, sometimes the execution of it, that a lot of times when I'm doing the painting, a lot of times that's just labor. It's just tedious labor and work. But I like that, though. I mean, I like that zeroed in laser focus on just craft with my hands. And to me, that conceptually, that's where a lot of the strength comes through as well, is just making it, you know, when I was doing work before in grad school, one of my goals was to make my work look so machined and make it look so indistinguishable from a digital print, right? I wanted the work to have no marks, no identifying brush strokes. I mean, I wanted it to look, and that's still something that I do today as well, is like, I do try to very much make the work, it's kind of my own John Henry battle, where I'm trying to beat the steam engine of the printer by doing it by hand still. So
that's kind of a pristine look, I think. That's the way I would.
I try.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
We really appreciate hearing from you directly about your work, and it looks beautiful down in the space.
Yeah, it was nice to actually like talk about, like, I've just been working and I haven't, you know, it's nice to kind of hear myself say some of these things, because I'm like, oh yeah, that is true, or that is something I've thought about. So
So I think now I will say a little bit of an introduction to Jonathan Swans. Jonathan works with many media and techniques, including glass blowing, casting, carving, and sculpting, as well as practices performance art. He recently returned from Louisville, Kentucky, where he was fabricating the components for his 2 wall-based installations, which are at First Hawaiian Center, as well as he was working on a commissioned piece with metal and glass for a lighting installation for a golf course in Florida. He received his BA in studio art, as well as a BA in philosophy from Center College in Danville, Kentucky, and his MFA from UH Manoa. And he's a regular lecturer in art at UH Manoa. At First Hawaiian Center, he exhibits eye-catching pieces from 2 different bodies of work. You'll encounter vibrantly colored glass sculpture inspired by Hawaii's fish and plant life, as well as fluidly organic sculptures with transparent and metallic surfaces. And these build upon an interest in the raw, energetic, and expressive potential of glass as a material. So I would like to turn it over to Jonathan.
All right. Thank you so much, Catherine. It's great to have this exhibition in fruition now. You know, it was a long conversation that started last year, and we were shooting for the summer, and it all feels just wonderfully timed, actually. So I'm just really grateful. Thanks for the opportunity to collaborate with you and the museum and First Hawaiian. It's really special. And, you know, for me, the title is not necessarily obvious to everyone who comes to the exhibition why it's called Parallel. And that came to me really because it's an exhibition of two bodies of work that were generated conceptually and created parallel to one another. They're very distinct paths of the way that I work with glass and my ideas about what I want to make and how I want to make it. And so the pieces that you're seeing right now, like these two pieces, are inspired by puffer fish. So there's a box puffer and then there's a white spotted puffer, interpreted working with what I like to think of as an Italian design aesthetic. Particularly, I'm highly influenced by Vanini, the Vanini design house. I spent a year working in Paris, France when I was 25 and would go to Italy every 4 or 5 months for the masters I worked with, who had their studio in Paris, but were also designers at Vanini. And so that was really influential on me. And it was while I was working with them that it was when I first saw their work that I had just gotten back from Hawaii when I was in college, and I was imagining what it would be like to make glass work that was inspired and stylized from the fish that I was swimming with in Molokai. And it took me literally over 10 years of seeking out masters to work with to develop the skills to be able to execute the work that you now see. My computer's low on juice. I'm just going to plug it in real quick. Okay, back online. Sorry about that. So that work had been developing conceptually for a long time, what I call tropical abstract. And I was thinking about that before I actually came to Hawaii for graduate school, but pause buttoned it, and I didn't develop that work while I was in grad school. And one of the other paths that I became engaged in was really looking at the materiality of glass and thinking about the materiality of me as an individual human and socially, our social materiality. And I was trying to imagine ways to develop studio exercises or investigations that were informed by what I would observe in the way people interacted with one another or ways that I felt. Like this piece, for instance, is if you think of light, there's the idea that light is both a particle and a wave. It's just simple, but there's this idea of duality. You know, Tom mentioned this idea of duality. You know, it runs in so many different paths, but there's often this experience that I have where I feel identified as one thing, and then that shifts based on the context. And that's the idea with the wave particle idea of light. And so for me, I wanted to develop a sculpture where I built a particle out of waves. And this is a solid piece of glass that probably weighs, 20 pounds. And so there's a entry point with an idea for this body of work. This one I call vibrant matter. So there's vibrant matter and tropical abstract. Those are the two bodies of work that are on exhibition, parts of those bodies of work in the exhibition Parallel. And there's a couple of, so when I was in graduate school, I was really more deeply engaging in this, what I think of as abstract, expressive abstract sculptural making with glass, where I was using these parameters or experiments in the studio, and I didn't actually know what I was going to generate. Like, I didn't know what the outcome would be. I just wanted to put the glass under certain limitations or gravity dynamics or restrictive elements. There's two pieces in the exhibition that I call constrictions. And, for me, it's just simply was inspired by my experience where I feel restrained as I'm trying to move towards a goal or something that I desire or develop facility with, and there's obstacles and there's the experience of feeling constricted. And so for me, it was, okay, so if I'm using this word constriction to talk about my own experience, which suggests that I have a material nature, how can I develop a practice in the glass studio where I intentionally constrict or restrain the glass and see if I can create some kind of loosely anthropomorphic form? And I was developing that over time. And so there's two pieces in the exhibition that are these constrictions. And you'll see the vibrant matter work is largely monochromatic, and that's a way that I try to emphasize the material nature of the glass. And you'll see I also work a lot with a mirroring, and so there's a body of work. There's a wall installation that I call them Mercurials, and so this particular Mercurial, I did two originally, and one was silver and one was black, and it has this duality, this polarity of yin and yang for me. And so this one is the black matter, kind of the density and the darkness and what I would think of as the feminine essence, or the yin essence, the lunar essence, that the fertile essence from which things emerge. And so those pieces are blown glass, and when you see them, they look more like metal, but they're actually blown glass. I want to talk about this one that just came up on the screen. This one is inspired by parrotfish. And so this is the most recent body of work that I developed. I made this last summer in Louisville, Kentucky. I was working on a large commission for the Halipuna Hotel, if you're familiar, near across from the Halekulani. So whenever I have a big project, I use the dividends that I make, the profits, to just make art. Like, that's really my life. And so I spent a lot of energy invested in developing these parrotfish. And this is truly one of my favorite pieces I've ever made. It's working with a particular kind of technique called Marini, which is Italian. And I learned the foundation and the refinement of Marini work with my Danish maestro, Tobias Moll, who I studied with in Denmark, and I assist him when he travels and teaches around the world. This particular piece, though, incorporates so many of the things that I've learned over almost 20 years of glassmaking to be able to make this piece with the level of refinement and buoyancy and harmony that it holds. And I wish all of you could actually pick that piece up, because it has a resonance that you feel. That's one of the things for me as an artisan and craftsperson. Like, I want handmade things in my life, that they help remind me of my humanness and keep me connected to my body as a tool and as an instrument. And really foundationally, when it comes down to all of the work that I do, I think the common ground is really conscious embodiment and craft. And when I think of differentiating, there's a couple ways I say this. One is that I want to equally influence or put importance on practice and play. And so the body of work that I call Tropical Abstract is very much design, conceptualized as a design, and then executed. And so I'm literally, really specifically, like the piece on the left is a wrasse. It's based off a fish. And so I know what colors I'm working with and rough ideas of form. And then I try to execute it. And there's this practice and there's a discipline in that. The piece on the right is actually the very beginning generative body of work for the Tropical Abstract, and that's a kukui net. So it has the black and the white seed, and it's a type of Italian technique called battuto, which means carved. It means hammered, actually. And the surface is carved. The black is layered over the white and then carved. And then the root structure is made separately. And for me, yeah, that's a really important piece, actually, just because it's the origin kind of the tropical abstract work. So discipline, well, practice and play. So that there's this practice kind of skill in the tropical abstract. This work, like this is a really tough piece to execute in terms of its scale. It's blown, all the elements are combined, and then it's carved. So each color section is carved in a cold technique where I actually hold the piece of glass and use a lathe with diamond embedded in brass wheels that's water cooled to carve texture. That's the battuto. The other part is play, or what I think of is I practice and play, and I also think of perfect, and I think of discipline and spontaneity. And so the play is really an opportunity for discovery, and that's where, again, where I was saying, like, I don't know what's going to happen. In this particular piece, I call this an emerger, and it's really about that that vital energy that's transitioning between states. It's transmutating and it's birthing itself into the void. And so this piece has a void capsule on the top, if you will. And the void comes first in my idea, and that the void has to be there. The space, akasha would be the Sanskrit word for space, and then the material emerges into that. So this is the emerger, and there's this gradation of color in here from the black at the bottom, where it really comes from darkness, and then it moves into the light, and it moves into the silver, which for me is the consciousness, the Shiva consciousness, or the masculine, or the yang, whatever your polarity system you want to work with. And so for me, I really need to be constantly moving between the play and the practice. Like I want to hone my skills, and these are the constrictions. So I want to hone my skills, and I want to develop facility, and I want to be able to execute things that there's a gratification in being able to accomplish anything, right, that we do. It doesn't matter how simple the act is, but in glass blowing in particular, it's very technical. And so the pursuit of trying to make something work technically is really exciting, and it's addictive. Like the parrotfish, I spent hours and hours and hours just constantly going back to the fire and breaking things and discovering things and sweating and bleeding, and finally coming up with a few pieces that to me were the culmination of months of work. And so that one parrotfish that's in the exhibition is, like I said, it's really one of my favorites I ever made. These are the constrictions, and this would be that example of the spontaneity in the play, where like I could have never drawn that form and then tried to replicate it. For me, this was something where I'm in the studio working, and in this particular situation, I'm working with a black glass, and it's made into a long tube that's quite thick, and then I bind it with wire, and then I inflate the piece, and then it moves in its own way. It has this spontaneous swelling that happens that I couldn't replicate it, I couldn't draw that, and then that results in a piece. In this particular one, I actually took two elements and they're combined. So there's no opening on this one. This one's quite unique. And for me, someone asked about Tom's influence of historic artists, and for me, there's plenty for sure that I'm thinking of. And like Henry Moore, if is one of my favorite British sculptors, and he did a bunch of abstracted nude figures and reclining nudes, and Hans Belmer, if his work, like these pieces very much have an aesthetic of Hans Belmer and Jean Arp and Henry Moore, and these people who I was devoted to their work growing up. And this one, it's a good example of the mirroring, and you can see if you really every section of the piece is a mirror. And so there was a point when I was thinking of this is going to get a little bit lofty conceptually, just work with me, but I was wondering, what are the things that create state change? And I'm working with glass, and so I'm working with glass. It's moving between solid and liquid, and what facilitates state change in me or in humanity or in society. And so it was really the idea that I kind of came to was consciousness. It's like self-awareness, consciousness, awareness. And it was like, well, consciousness to me is untangible. It's not tangible, but what if it was tangible? What if it had a materiality to it? What would the materiality of consciousness be? And before it had a form, it had a quality in my mind, and that quality was pure reflection. And that's when I committed to learning how to silver glass, was because I wanted to create something that suggested the materiality of consciousness. Those led to, okay, well then what's the form of consciousness? And that's where I came up with these mercurial shapes, where they're transmutive, they're somewhere between liquid and solid. And the way that these developed, when I was making the shapes, I didn't actually have an idea of how I would organize them or work with them, or if they would, how that they would ultimately become these wall installations. And so the first ones that I did were just silver, and then I did them in black, and then I've opened those up and I've worked with different color palettes. These are particularly interesting. These are actually fish eyes. So the one that's in the front, it's 4 individual pieces of glass put together and then opened up into a plate and then all carved down. But the actual colors are derivative of a lantern toby. And so if you see a picture of a lantern toby, it has those colors. And this one is the eye of a Hawkeye fish. And so they're made to be, and they have a bit of a curve to them. You can't quite tell, so they look like a lens. But then they're actually carved, so they start to take on a textural suggestion of an eye. So in this picture, you can see kind of the carving or the cutting that's in the green band. And so just in terms of discipline and practice and design, those fish eyes, there's a third one, and that's the series. There's a white spotted toby eye that's not in this exhibition. But those 3 are part of this concept of tropical abstract. And then I have, a couple wrasse ideas, and there's some parrotfish. So that's how that all works contextually. Yeah, and these, this was a fun development where I was once commissioned to make a piece for a residence. And one thing I've come to really appreciate about commissions is that it gives me an opportunity to innovate, and collaborate. I'm working in a conversation with people, whether it's going to be in a public space or a private space, but getting to do work specific to an environment is really exciting for me. And in this situation, I made one like that's on the left, those tubes. I was approached by a gentleman, and he wanted a piece for a particular part of his home. And so it inspired me to innovate and create this work that then became really important to me. And working with these are more Swedish kind of styles. So I could keep going, but maybe we should turn it over to questions.
Yes, so please, if anyone has questions, put them in the chat is probably the easiest way. If that's not easy for you, then you can unmute yourself and ask a question directly. I have a question. So both of you are very inspired by and tied to philosophy. Jonathan spoke of the materiality of consciousness and trying to work with that as an idea for his glass pieces. And Tom really thinking about the meaning of order and chaos. So what I'm wondering, do either of you, and actually this is a question for both of you, but maybe directing it to Jonathan first. Do you keep a journal? Do you write much? And if so, does that help sort of flesh out your philosophical ideas and how you can translate that to visual work?
Yeah, I definitely am taking notes often. And, for me, one of my favorite things to do is when I'm really sitting with an idea is to discuss it with people that are, my friends. But yeah, take notes but in terms of material development and innovation, that happens really in the studio. So there's a real difference between, how I'm getting inspired by certain things and taking notes on that, and then when I actually go to the studio and just play and explore and let that develop on its own.
Yeah, I wish I had an interesting answer, but no, I don't. No, I don't. I mean, my Photoshop kind of serves that sketchbook function, but I go running with my dog, and I just think a lot of these things, and then sometimes it's bad because I probably should write some of these things down because I'll get some really good ideas or concepts to explore. And then I get into the studio the next day and I execute them, but then sometimes I just forget them. And I'm not disciplined very orderly when it comes to writing and sketching things out ahead of time, I suppose.
Jonathan, so you really have two different studios that you work in, as far as I understand, one in Kentucky and at the University of Hawaii. And if that's correct, I'm wondering, does the place where you create your work have an effect on the meaning of the piece, or what sort of comes out eventually emerges in your studio practice?
Yeah. So I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for 7 years before I moved to Hawaii 10 years ago. And that's where I had my first glass studio. And I have a huge community of artist friends there. And there's 3 glass studios in downtown Louisville. And so one of my good friends has a studio. And when I go there, he literally gives me the keys. And I get to have an incredible amount of creative liberty. And when I'm teaching at the university, that's just not the case. It's a educational facility that's intended to work with students. So it's not suited for me to be as productive in the way that I inherently want to be. So I have big projects. I go to Louisville to work for exhibitions. And yeah, before I moved here, I was doing work that was inspired by kind of Midwest landscape. And then I made these one blown pieces that were all cow patterns, and I worked with these stylized forms of haystacks and silos. And but being in Hawaii, I think I'm saturated with an aesthetic and a lifestyle and a relationship to the environment that I carry with me wherever I go. And so I very much take that aloha from Hawaii when I'm in Kentucky and I'm working. I'm still open to what that environment, the current environment, has to say or offer for influence. But when I go there to work, it's usually because I have a pretty specific project or exhibition that I'm building.
Would anybody like to ask either of the artists a question? Susan.
I wanted to ask our first artist why he chose wood rather than metal or glass. I know or canvas. Particularly metal and glass might give very pristine lines. And I might have missed that in his presentation, but I didn't hear it. Thomas?
Yeah, the reason why I paint on wood is because the hardness of the surface allows me to get really fine lines with tape. When I have canvas gives a little bit, so it's hard to get the pressure of the tape the right way. So wood, it just serves a practical function of allowing me to make the lines cleaner. I do the larger pieces on canvas, and I've worked on both. I've just found that when I do the more hard edge precision work, wood is really the best way to go.
Yep. Okay, I just wondered because glass and metal would also allow those pristine lines, but they're
sure,
perhaps, yeah.
Sure.
I like some paintings that I've older paintings that I've seen on Mill, for example. Yeah. With regard to Jonathan's work, I think it would be wonderful, Catherine, sometime if we could get a video of him or others working on glass, because I think it's harder for some of us to conceptualize that. I've seen glass workers, but I'm not sure everybody has, and how you can do these wonderful shapes and differences and colors and can be so clean and wonderful. Thank you.
All right, I think if we don't have any further questions, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and especially thank Catherine and Jonathan and Thomas for giving us a sneak peek into the exhibitions that are currently at the First Hawaiian Center. So if you have a chance, please go down there in person if you find yourself downtown. I can't wait to go see these works in person. They look incredible. So I can't imagine what they look like in person. Catherine, I don't know if you have any details on sort of when the galleries are open or when folks can go. If you could share that, that would be great.
Yes, so the galleries are open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. The bank is closed on weekends and major holidays, and they do follow all the current COVID safety guidelines. So be sure that you wear a mask and practice social distancing. And also there's a 5-person occupancy limit in the galleries at one time. Other than that, it's wonderful to have these works down at the downtown gallery space, and it's such a great location for people who live and work downtown to see works by local Hawaii artists. So thank you so much to First Hawaiian Bank for your sponsorship and support. And thank you to Tom and Jonathan for joining us tonight. It was very inspiring talk and wonderful to hear from you. Thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And another thank you to Neil Char and Helena Norton Westberg for joining us as well, giving your great opening remarks. If you did enjoy this, if you're not already a member at the Honolulu Museum of Art, please feel free to check our chat box. We have a link to our membership and collectors page, so you can learn more about our membership levels. And if you have any further questions beyond that, please feel free to reach out via email or phone number to us as well. And since we recorded this, we will be also putting this up on our HOMA YouTube channel at a later time. So we will let you know when that's available. So you can come back and enjoy this talk again if you like. And I think that is it. So
Betty and Kath, I think that that the bank used to give you a half hour or a certain period of time if you were doing other banking business so that you would have time to look at the exhibit, but maybe Neil can answer that question. I haven't tried it in a while. But
Sure, we'll validate your parking.
thank you, that makes a difference. Yes, to some
definitely downtown, yeah.
Thank you everybody for joining us. Great discussion and great presentation from the artists, and thank you, Catherine, as well for moderating.
All right, folks, thank you so much. Signing off.